The scripture text today, which you'll see on the screens, is just one verse. And you think maybe, how can you do a sermon on just one verse? Jonathan Edwards, who I did my dissertation in, did an entire year's worth of sermons on one verse. So I think we can just stick to one for now. But this is today's verse, which says this: "It's better to have little with fear of the Lord than to have great wealth and inner turmoil." And that's from Proverbs 15:16. Will you read that with me out loud? Everyone, let's do it together. Here we go. "Better to have little with fear of the Lord than to have great worth and inner turmoil." And we're repeating the same verse from last week because I don't remember anything from last week. If those of you that were here, you would know that we tried to show a video and I ended up having to preach with the flu. And I don't know what I said, but let's just say we didn't put it online. We're just going to leave it the way it was, but I'm glad that's all over with. Today what we're going to do is we're going to be doing a sermon on our series called Wealth and Poverty, where we're talking about what it means to think about money as a Christian person. And I'm going to table that sermon for 4 minutes from now because I think it's important as a pastor and even just as a community that we process for half a second the election of the last week, which is one of the biggest deals. I don't know about you, whether you were voting left or right or however you feel about these things or not voting. Almost everyone woke up a little surprised on Wednesday with feelings, right? And you're not sure what to do with those. And so I just want to talk for just a few seconds about this. And here's what I would say. I want to tell you a little bit of a story that a lot of people don't know, but it's like one of the most important stories in the Christian faith if you went back and looked at it over 2,000 years. So Christianity started out after Jesus as a very small group of people. I mean, when Jesus died, there was literally 12 and maybe a couple more, and that was it. There were not a lot of Christians. And so to think now that there's over 2 billion 2,000 years later is mind-blowing. But when the first Christians started doing their thing, what happened is everyone hated them. And so we know that by the 60s in Rome that Nero was persecuting them, and he would even have parties, find Christians, and when they needed light, they would light one of the Christians on fire. I mean, that's how bad things were in those days for Christians. For the first 100, 200 years of Christianity, they were persecuted for their faith. But then, in 313, one of the most amazing things happened. And do you know what happened in 313? This is important just if you know history at all. This is where Constantine won the Battle of Milvian Bridge and really solidified Christianity as the official religion of the Roman Empire. So Christianity went from being a highly persecuted group for the 300 years after Jesus. And then in 313, Constantine had this vision of a cross right before a very important battle. And then overnight, Christianity went from, I'm going to die for my faith, to now I get rewards for my faith. Like that. And so if you're a Christian, how do you respond in that moment, right? You're kind of excited, you're not excited, because some people thought that maybe people would just become Christian and it didn't mean anything anymore. All these emotions start happening. Well, for 100 years, between 313 and 410, Christianity enjoyed the blessings of the government. They got tax breaks, they got support from the emperor, everything was going super well for them. And then in 410, something really important happened. Do you know what happened in 410, 411? The fall of Rome. The fall of Rome. And so Christians who for 100 years had enjoyed all this blessing and prosperity from the government, in 410, Rome gets conquered. And when Rome gets conquered, you have to remember, this was one of the most important cataclysmic events in all of human history. Rome controlled almost all of Western civilization. And when the vassals and other people came in and started taking over Rome in 410, everyone was like, how are we going to live anymore? And Christians especially were wondering, how can we still be Christian if the government doesn't support us anymore? It was a really big crisis. You know, do we destroy the churches? And a lot of the churches did get destroyed, but they didn't know what to do. And so St. Augustine wrote a book that's one of the most important books in the history of the world called City of God. City of God. And what he does in that book is, for the first time in Christian history, he really processes in a powerful way this idea that the church is totally different than the world. And that no matter what happens outside this church, God is still sovereign and at work among his people, and nothing can change that. So whether Rome's in charge or whether Rome gets destroyed, the church is going to keep its heart beating every single day because the Spirit doesn't die and the Spirit's never done. And so no matter what happens out there, this is the encouragement that I would give to you. Whether you're excited, don't put too much hope in that. Whether you're discouraged, don't be too discouraged, because that's not where our hope is. So that's my word to us a little bit. And I want to just say this, is after the service we do this thing called Digging Deeper, and it's only going to be for about 15 minutes today because we have a new member class. But if you're interested in talking about some election things or asking me any questions about that, I'm going to be in the chapel immediately after the service just to talk, because I know that this is a crazy thing that's happening. But above all, this is my last word, is that if you thought that the election was the best thing that could ever happen, be careful of idolatry, where you place your faith in people and not God. And if you're really discouraged from what happens, I can give you some encouragement that God is not the same thing as the government. That's a crazy thought, right? But I think that's what God would say and what Christians would say who have been around for thousands of years, because they've always wrestled that. I didn't do the math, but I was thinking to myself, this church has been here since 1896. How many elections has it been through? Well, here's what I can guarantee you, is no matter how many more elections come, this church is going to be here still. And that's the good news of God. All right. Done? Now we're going to talk about money, and some of you are like, that's worse, Pastor Chris. We really don't want to talk about money. But one of the reasons why I always feel comfortable talking about it is because that's what people do talk about. Whenever I meet one-on-one with folks, that's usually what we want to talk about sometimes. And Jesus talked about it a lot. One of the things you can never go wrong with as a pastor is talking about the things that Jesus talked about. And so I figure I'm just going to stick with that today. And today we're going to do a little bit of a reflection on the verse which was up there, which says it's better to have less and have fear of the Lord than it is to have great wealth and inner turmoil. And so let's talk about that for just a minute. And today there's 3 things that I want to lift up. The first one is a temptation. And the temptation is that if I have more, then I'll have peace. The answer is on how if I have God, I can have peace. And then I'm going to show us how, as a church, we try and accomplish those things. But the first one is this. There is a temptation that says, I will have peace if I have more. I will have peace if I have more. More money, more influence, more power, more friends. I don't know what your more is. But all of us want peace. I want to be able to go home and sleep well. I want to know that everything's going to be okay. I want inner peace. And I've watched Kung Fu Panda 1, 2, and 3, and I know inner peace is a big deal in the world, and it's not just me. Christians want peace. Everybody wants peace. But when we look at the media, for example, we see versions of what a peaceful, good life looks like. And I want to just look at them for half a second. Now, this is not scientific in any way. But there are different versions of what a peaceful and good life look like that are presented to us every day. The first one is the Modern Family version. And I don't know if I love this show. I think it's a great show. But they have a specific view of what a peaceful, good life looks like. And do you know what it is? The Modern Family view says this. It says, if we can just have a perfect, loving family, everything is going to be okay. The world's crazy, but if I just have that family dinner every night, everything's going to be okay, right? And the honest truth for many of us is, I want that too, and I actually have a great family. But if all I had was my family, is that going to satisfy all the desires of your heart and give you peace? For many of us, our families are a source of extreme pain. For some of us, our families are a source of extreme disappointment. But if you invest all your hopes and your dreams in family, my only thought would be, well, good luck with that. Because it doesn't always go the way you want it to. Another version of what the good life looks like in media is House of Cards. How many of you watch House of Cards? I love that show. I watch these things in one day. I binge watch the whole thing. And in the House of Cards version, the main character will finally have peace and be happy when he gets what? Unlimited power. He thinks that the happy and the good life comes when he finally reaches the presidency and has everything that he could ever want, and then everything's going to be okay because he finally has all the power that he wants. And what you find out is the second you actually sit in that chair, you're still fighting the same battles that you were the day before, and it's actually harder to keep and maintain power than it is to get it. At least that's what I think. Another example of what the good life looks like is often in commercials that you see. And this is my all-time favorite one. I just laugh when I see this, but how many of you have seen the Cialis commercials with the bathtubs? So there's this version of this is what the good life looks like, that you finally get retired and you're beautiful looking for an old person. I'm just judging because I'm in my 30s. They're always in their 50s or plus in these commercials. But then out of nowhere, and I have no idea why, these two amazing bathtubs appear, right? And the good life in these commercials is to be able to sit in a bathtub with no cares of the world and a little blue pill that can make you extremely happy. That's the good life. I'll finally have inner peace if that's what I get. At least that's what the world tells us a little bit, right? If I could just get there, then everything's going to be well. And I'm not going to process that with you on whether or not you think that's good or bad. I'll just give two more examples. I could go on and on. But another one is The Bachelor and The Bachelorette shows and American Idol. And there's this idea that the good life and I'll finally be happy is if someone recognizes me for who I am and I can finally become famous. If I could finally just get that breakthrough that I wanted and then be famous, everything is going to go really well. But we know that those relationships in Bachelor and Bachelorette rarely work out. Most people forget American Idols. I have no idea who American Idol number 5 was anymore, and I couldn't care less. And maybe they did well and maybe they didn't, but those people fade and disappear faster than you ever knew their name. Another example of what a good life looks like is NCIS or Blacklist. I don't know if you watch these shows, but in these shows, the good life knows that the world stinks, but if we could just get justice just a little bit, then everything's going to be okay. I'm finally going to have peace if that murderer will finally get caught and put in jail. I'll finally have peace if I can avenge that person, if I can finally get it right. And what I've learned, I think, is that the more justice you get, often the less satisfied you feel, and that there's never enough. And I also know that if you finally have justice met, you can never bring back or undo the pain that was initially caused. So we live in a world that presents all these different models of what it means to have a peaceful life, of what it means to have a good life. And here's what I think that if we actually got any of those things, you would say, I think I want more. And I think I need more than this. At the end of my bathtub, is there anything waiting? At the end of my justice and my dagger and my jail sentence, is there anything else that can bring me more peace? It's one of the biggest questions any of us will ever ask ourselves is what will finally make me happy and what will finally bring me peace? And it doesn't help that we live in a world that wants to give you whatever you want. There's now these buttons on Amazon that you can put all around your house, and when you run out of something, you just touch it and it orders it for you. That's amazing, right? One-click buttons to get whatever you want anywhere in your life. I mean, if you could ever want anything, that's what I would want. Just a button everywhere. I push, and then boom, it instantly shows up. We live in a world that's now cashless almost in a lot of ways, and I feel like I can get whatever I want because I just swipe a card. And I don't even feel it. I don't even know what happens somewhere on a sheet of paper. I just swipe this magic card and things happen. It's a miracle. It's pretty incredible, I think. I know Dave Ramsey, whose video we were going to show last week, he says that, if you actually had to hand out money for the things that you buy, you would probably buy way less because you feel it more. But companies are smart. They know that if they want you to spend money and start buying things all the time, they disconnect you from the feeling of loss of money. And so they just make it super simple and really easy. I was with one of our church elders just having dinner this last week, and we were driving past these payday loan things, that are just all over the place, especially as you go up Coral Way. And we had just had a budget meeting this week, and we're thinking about our budgets. And I was like, I have an idea for how we could meet all of our budget needs. Let's cash a check at one of these payday loan places. They don't ask any questions whatsoever, and you can go to multiple ones. I doubt they even talk to each other. We can get as much money as we need tomorrow. Is that a good idea? We have all these desires of our hearts, mixed with a society that wants to meet all of those desires as instantly as you could possibly want. And when you push those two things together, whoa. Are we a happy and inner peace people? Or are we distracted? And are we fragmented? And are we confused? What I would put before you is that the idea that we can have whatever we want, whenever we want it, and the more we can get, the better, that style of life will cause you more pain than one that's simple and one that's focused on God. And that's what I want to just talk to you briefly about today. One of my challenges in life, in my spiritual life this last year, because I'm such an academic, heady person, is I've started listening to a lot more music, and I think it's been healthy for me. But this week I was listening to this band called Caedmon's Call, which I remember in high school and in junior high listening to, not junior high, college. And there was this lyric that I must have listened to the song at least 100 times this week, because there was this lyric that really caught me, and it says this. It says, "This world has nothing for me, and this world's got everything. All that I could want and nothing that I need." I'll say it one more time. It says this. "This world has nothing for me, and it's got everything. All that I could want and nothing that I need." You know, I wake up in the morning and I'm a hungry person. I got to get food. I got to go get all my work done. But my heart's hungry for more than just that, and my stomach's hungry for more than that. I'm hungry for success, and I'm hungry for more things. And I know that every time you buy a car, there's another model. There's a reason why they come out with new models every year. It's because they know that you'll buy it because you always want more. Same with iPhone. Why don't they come out with a new iPhone every 6 years? Wouldn't that be really easy for us? But they know that we want more, and we're hungry every day when we wake up. And what the gospel tells us, what the scriptures tell us, is that even though we're hungry, this world cannot satisfy the desires of our heart. Christianity has an answer to that. I'll talk about that in a minute. But did you know that other world religions try to answer this question too? If I wasn't a Christian and I had to be another religion, which one do you think I'd be? That's an interesting question for a pastor to ask, right? For me, I think it would be Buddhism. At least the ones that I've studied, and this is why. It has a pretty interesting answer for how we find inner peace and stop all these cravings in our heart. And so Buddhism has 4 noble truths. Let me share them. It says this. It says suffering exists. So straight up, suffering is real. You got to get over that. And then it says this. Suffering arises when we have attachment to desires. Suffering arises when we have attachment to desires. The 3rd noble truth is that suffering ceases when we decrease our attachment to desire. And the 4th one is you decrease that by following the 8-fold path, which is you have to have a right view of this, this, and this, and this, and this. But Buddhism's answer to the problem of a world where we're craving things and never being satisfied is to say, well, the answer is stop wanting it. Stop wanting things. If you could just stop wanting things, wouldn't that be wonderful? Man, I would really like not to walk by beautiful women as a male and have no desires. It'd be so much easier. It'd be really nice not to walk past new cars and not say, I wish I want that. Wouldn't it be really nice just to live in a world where all of a sudden you didn't care anymore and didn't have any desires and you were never bothered by all these desires? Well, that's what Buddhism says is the right way to solve this problem. They would say the real answer to finding peace in your life is to not want anything. And maybe that's true, but I don't think so. And the reason why I don't think so is because Christianity has a very different solution to the problem of suffering that I think is more compelling. And this is what it says. It says that your goal isn't to stop wanting, but it's to want the right things. The goal isn't to stop wanting things, it's just to want the right things. And let me give you an example. Jesus was one day at a well, and he sees this woman. And he walks up to her, and they weren't supposed to talk. That's a whole other story. It was a Samaritan woman, and Jesus wasn't supposed to be hanging out with her, but he gets involved in this conversation. And she goes, oh, who are you, and what's going on? And he goes, do you want some water? And Jesus says, if you even knew who you were asking, you would ask me for some water. And she goes, why would I ask you for water? And Jesus says, well, the world offers H2O. What I can offer you, you'll drink and you'll never be thirsty again. That's a bold claim. What Jesus is saying is, I can give you something that will actually satisfy you for now and forever, and you'll never be thirsty again. He says, I am the living water. That's a bold claim. In a world that tries to answer all of our desires and all of our hopes, Jesus comes along and says, I can give you that. That's a really bold claim. Can he? You know, I know that as a pastor, it's really easy to just get up here and preach the Bible, right? And you get up here and you just say it. But what would it actually look like if we believed that and felt that Jesus really deep down had satisfied me and gave me the deepest desires of my heart? That's a big deal. The proverb that we read today says this: better a little with fear of the Lord than great wealth with turmoil. And what that means is you can go out and seek all those things and get whatever you want. It's going to end in turmoil. But it's way better to have fear of the Lord and a life with me than it is to have anything else. Again, I want to emphasize this. When we say fear of the Lord, what does that mean? What does it mean to have fear of the Lord? And it says fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom in different places. Here it says fear of the Lord is way better than great riches. Why? God, I'm not sure why you would want me to have fear of you instead of money, because money is awesome and money can do great things for me. Why? Well, here's what it means. Fear of the Lord means a with God life where you're living in God's presence and with God every single day. Fear of the Lord doesn't mean I'm scared of you. Fear of the Lord means I'm aware of you and I feel your power and I feel your love. Could you imagine what it would be like to go through a day where you felt God's presence with you wherever you went? You felt His power and His sovereignty. But you also felt His grace and His forgiveness and His compassion all wrapped into one. That's what old theologians would call living coram Deo. Coram just means in front of it. What would it mean to live life where every moment of the day you realize that God was next to you and with you? God is offering us a life where He says, I will do that with you. And in fact, I'm already there if you would just turn and recognize it. But this is the claim. The claim is this. The claim is that if you have fear of the Lord, you will actually have inner peace. You will actually have everything you've ever wanted. And so how is that possible? How is it possible that fear of the Lord leads to getting everything that I want? Because those two things don't easily click in my mind. And this is my best way of figuring it out, at least for me. When I have fear of the Lord, one of the things that happens in my life is I start seeing things from an eternal perspective and not from a temporal perspective. From an eternal perspective and not from a temporary perspective. And here's what I mean by that. Every day I wake up and I want to throw my life into things that don't last. I want to invest my time and energy in things that kind of disappear really quickly. If I spend all my life seeking good food, and that's not a bad thing per se. God loves good food and I love good food and that's totally okay. But if that's what I put all my energy and life into, can I take that with me? And how long does that really last? There's a stupid joke, but I think it's relevant, where there was this really rich man who had spent all of his life getting all this money, all the money that he could find. And when he died, his will said this: I want you to turn it into gold bricks, and then I want to be buried with it. So he had this coffin, and he said, when I die, I want you to put all of my money in my coffin with me, so that I can take it with me when I get to heaven. And the joke goes that when this guy actually gets to heaven, he shows up kind of dragging all this gold with him. And when he gets to the gate, St. Peter says, what are you doing? What are you doing? And he says, well, I'm taking all my money with me because this is what I value. And St. Peter says, that's hilarious. And the guy goes, well, why are you laughing? He goes, well, why would you bring cement with you? And the point was, when you get to heaven, that stuff is just everywhere and means nothing. And taking all your gold and all your riches with you isn't going to mean anything one day. But here's what does mean something. Here's what does last forever. As I was thinking of that phrase, there's nothing in this world that matters and nothing that I need. But I was laying on my bed this week thinking about that, and I had just been holding my little daughter Grace, and I look over at my wife and I go, is it true that there's nothing in this world that matters? And I'm looking at her as she's asleep and she has no idea that I think these deep thoughts next to her. And I thought to myself, you know, there is something in this world that matters. You. People. Did you know that before God made the world, He had everything He could ever want? He was totally happy and doing really well, and He didn't make the world because He needed anything. But He made the world because He thought that it would be better if He made people that were like Him, because then He could just enjoy their presence every single day. I think the world is a beautiful thing when we start looking at the things that are going to outlast this world. And here's what's going to outlast this world. Every single one of us in this room. You were not made for this life. You were made for another one. And this life matters, and it's important, and the decisions we make have consequences. But what's amazing to me to think is that you and I are going to be hanging out one day, not in this room, but somewhere else for eternity. And that's a crazy thought to think about. It changes the way I spend my time. It changes the way I spend my money. It changes the way I think and feel about people when I recognize that this world is not going to last. Jesus says this. He says, don't store up all your treasures and invest all your energy where moth and rust destroy and where thieves can break in and steal. But instead put all your energy into a place where those things don't matter. Where your treasure is, there your heart is also. And so, church, where is your heart, and are you investing in things that will outlast this life? Is there anything where people look at you from an outward perspective and say, that person's doing things for the kingdom and not for now? One of the ways that Jesus taught this is he said, when you do good things, do it in secret. Because he knew we don't want fame. What we really want is to actually be a blessing to people. And we can get so caught up in just wanting to be famous and to be helpful and to do good things. But God wants our hearts more than anything else. Having an eternal perspective means I'm far more inclined to have those hard conversations than to talk about the weather. You know, I often do this where I'll spend time with someone, and often as a pastor, I only have maybe 30 minutes with someone, maybe an hour, maybe a lunch, and then I won't see them again for like another year. And I know that my job as a pastor is to walk into that lunch saying, Lord, I'm asking you that this little hour that I have with someone, that we would talk about things that have eternal significance and not just how the election go. It changes the way you live your life when you think about it from a longer span of time. And that's the way God sees us. And the last thing I would say is that if you want to have the inner desires of your heart met, there's only one person who can do that. And the only way you'll ever find true peace is if you find your meaning and purpose in life. Your meaning and purpose in life. You know, Rick Warren is famous for this. He wrote a book called The Purpose-Driven Life, and it was a major bestseller and super famous. And here's what he said. He said, it doesn't matter if you were an accident by your parents. You are not an accident to God. You are not an accident. Every single one of us in this room, God knows our name, and he counts the hairs on our head, and he dies for us. That's a powerful thought, to think that he died for you. Not you, but for you. And then the next point is this, is that do you know what you were made for? When you wake up in the morning, do you have a purpose that guides every moment of it as you go throughout your day? Well, I think this is your purpose, and this is a broad one. You'll have to get more specific in a minute, but this is your purpose, not you. The purpose of your life is not to make you happy, not to make you successful, and not to make you blessed. The purpose of your life is to use whatever blessings you have to be a blessing to other people, and in so doing, you actually find peace. When you lose yourself, you gain it. When you give away your life, you find it. And when you give, you receive. It's one of the craziest messages of the Bible. It makes absolutely no sense until you actually practice it and live it for a while. If you want inner peace, what you have to do is think about things from an eternal perspective and ask God, what is my purpose in life? And if you find that, you find more gold than you could ever have. Every celebrity has money, but do they have peace? There are a lot of really famous folks out there. There are a lot of really successful people out there. And I know they're just as unhappy as the rest of us. But here's what I know, is Jesus says, I can give you living water. And here's what I need you to do. I need you to come and follow me. Come and follow me, and you will find real life. Do you really believe that? It's really hard for me to think about that. Like, what would it change on my day-to-day if I actually believed that and did it? It would change things for me. It would change the way I spend my time, change the way I spend my money, change the words that I say that come out of my mouth. And this is our awkward transition to the last part, which is this. We're doing a giving campaign. I'm just joking. That sounds really bad, doesn't it? But this is what I believe is this church isn't just a church. It has like wood pews and it's got fancy walls and we do church and it has programs and all that. But deep down in my core, I believe that this place does things that nothing else in the world can. Because it does this. In a world that's completely broken and divided out there, we say that we are brothers and sisters in Christ, and no matter how you voted, I will hug you and love you and die for you. Where else can you find that? Where else can you find in the world a place that has a message that says this, is that you have more value to the God of the universe, that He would give His own life for you because He loves you so much? Where do you find that kind of love and grace in the world? We have a place here, I hope, at this church where people are actually finding friends that you can be open and vulnerable with and they won't judge you. That is crazy. Wherever I go out in the world, I feel like whenever I open myself up a little bit, it's judgment and it's critique and it's you're not good enough. But inside these walls, I can assure you, every single one of you is good enough for God. That's a message. That is a place where we can all come and find grace and healing and forgiveness and hope and community. All the deep desires of our heart, we can rediscover our meaning and our purpose in a way that no one else can give us. And I'm done trying to find justice and money and sex and power as ways that I think will give me everything that I want in my life. I want to find God instead. So this is a dorky thing, but you'll see the giving card. We're going to talk about it in a couple weeks. What we're asking for, I'm just being honest, is your help. I believe in what God does in this place. I've seen the healing that comes through it, and I've seen lives changed, and I've seen the way God's changed my life. And at the very least, do it just for a poor little pastor who is thankful for the chance to serve you. But above all, church, this is my hope and my dream, is that we become people who have peace, not by giving up on the world, but by truly finding the God who loves us. Will you pray with me? God, we give you thanks that in a world that is up and down and left and right, we can come back to you and you just gather us up like the children that we are in the hands of a Father who has tremendous love. Bless us this day. Help us to be a generous people, but above all, we want people that know your heart and whose hearts are being transformed by you. Bless us this day in the powerful name of Jesus. Amen.